Sorry, just trying to see what's going on with the Cubs game. Anyway, if there's one thing that I've learned about Neapolitan pizza, it's that you want to go ahead and try and not make Neapolitan pizza when you're making it. That is to say, don't worry about being authentic. The moment you're trying to channel that pizzeria that you went to in Italy, or that one that lives in your dreams, if you're like me, because I've never been to Italy, that's the moment that the fear is going to creep in, and the pizza is going to win. The dough won't rise. Your launch will fail. Or when you're rotating the pizza in the oven, a hole will rip. Side note, if the pizza rips a hole in it in the oven, go ahead and try to pull it out as quickly as possible and flip it in half on itself and just turn it into a calzone. Anyway, that's what I'm gonna try and do in today's video, which is not make Neapolitan pizza. But actually, I am gonna make Neapolitan pizza, as long as I don't f it up. First things first, we're gonna make the dough, and you're gonna need to start this at least 24 hours ahead of time. You can do this by hand, but honestly, it's gonna be a lot easier if you use a stand mixer. We're going to wanna let the yeast bloom in the water. Add 9 grams of yeast to 370 grams of water, and then just set that aside while you put together the rest of this. In the bowl of your stand mixer, you're gonna wanna go ahead and mix 570 grams of 00 bread flour with 12 grams of salt. And then on low, using the dough hook attachment, go ahead and pour in the water and yeast mixture, and then just let that mix until it forms a nice taut ball. And then go ahead and turn it off, pull it out, and then cover it in plastic wrap for 8 to 12 hours. Usually I would say I do 12 hours in the winter, 8 hours in the summer. It just kind of depends on what the ambient temperature in the room is. So usually if you do this in the morning before you go to work, by the time dinner's done, you'll be on to the next step. When the dough is ready, it's gonna look nice and puffed up like this. So what we're gonna do is go ahead and turn it out onto a lightly floured surface and then divide it into 4 equal pieces. The best way to do this is to take your dough before you cut it and put it on your scale and get your total measurements, because you can add everything together beforehand, but you lose some weight here and there to whatever stuck to your fingers, whatever stuck to the bowl and all that. So I find it's best to just go ahead and measure it and then divide that by 4 and then measure out each dough ball. You don't want to eyeball this because you're going to end up with some weird little pizza somewhere along the line that no one's going to be happy with. I mean, best case scenario, all you can do is turn that into a cheesy bread, which, well, that actually sounds pretty good. All right, so once you've turned your dough out and cut it into 4 equal quarters, you want to go ahead and form the ball. One of the easiest ways to do this is to fold the sides of the ball into each other, starting with the right and then the left, and then go ahead and grab the furthest point in front of you and pull it into the center and then roll it back. And then that should form a nice taut surface that you can use the sides of your hand to kind of fold into itself. As you watch me do that here, that'll probably make a lot more sense than me talking about it. So what I like to do with Neapolitan pizza is grab a quarter sheet tray, put a piece of parchment paper down on it, and then place the dough balls on there. I find that because these dough balls typically stretch to 12 or 14 inches, they're really not big enough as they go through their cold ferment to exceed the capacity of the quarter sheet tray. Anyway, put the dough in the fridge and leave it there for the next 24 to 72 hours. All right, 72 hours later, and it's time to make our pizza. So first things first, prep the surface for your dough balls. I like to use the wooden peel for up to 2 dough balls at a time. And I just go ahead and lightly flour it, place the dough balls down, flour them, and then put a layer of plastic wrap over that, and then finally a kitchen towel, just to weigh it down so that there's not any chance of any air getting in there and then forming a skin on the dough. And from here, you just need to wait 2 hours. All right, finally, the great reveal. The pizza that we are going to make today, if you hadn't noticed from the different shots you've already seen in this video, is a pesto pizza. So what that means is we need to make some pesto. Luckily, making pesto at home is pretty easy, especially if you have a food processor. What we'll do is start with 3/4 cup of pine nuts, throw them onto a little baby sheet tray, and then throw them into the oven at 350 and give them about 5 to 10 minutes to toast up. Just make sure that you are keeping an eye on them so they do not burn. You should smell a really nice nutty aroma when they're just about ready, and they will also take on a bit of a golden color as they go. While the pine nuts are toasting, we're gonna grate up about 100 grams of parmesan. Once that's done, we'll take about 3 cloves of garlic and give them a rough chop. We don't need to do too much here because the food processor is gonna do most of this work for us. All right, next we need about 100 grams of basil, and if you live near Trader Joe's, they sell these in about 115 gram clamshells, so you can just use that entire thing. Then follow that with your parmesan and your garlic, and go ahead and give that a quick pulse or two to just get that stuff broken down a little bit. And then we're gonna start drizzling in about 1 cup of extra virgin olive oil, drizzling it slowly until it's all incorporated. Once everything is nice and combined, give it a quick check and then salt to taste. Homemade basil usually keeps about 4 to 7 days in the fridge. So if you want to keep it longer, one thing I like to do is put it into an ice cube tray and then freeze that off. And then you've got some nice single serve cubes that you can pop out anytime you want pesto. Usually it doesn't take too long to thaw out on the counter, anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. All right, so now that we've got our pesto made, let's go ahead and assemble the pizza. I realize a lot of people get intimidated by forming the crust, but the number one thing you have to remember is no fear. The dough can smell it. What I like to do, and to be honest, what I like to do is probably not traditional, is go ahead and use my fingers to start pushing the dough out from the center to the crust, and then I turn it around until I get a nice flat, even surface while retaining that perimeter around the pizza. I see a lot of people where they kind of keep one hand on the dough on the peel, and then they kind of pull it up and slap it down. And honestly, I, for whatever reason, just cannot really get that one done right. But just remember, these doughs are only gonna go out to 12 to 14 inches. So if you get to 12 inches and you feel like there's a lot of thin spots going on, don't push it. The worst thing that can happen is you go too thin and then in the oven it rips. Now, ideally, you hit that sweet spot, you get as thin as humanly possible, and you have a success story in the oven. But honestly, I'd rather have a slightly thicker than normal pizza and have a pizza rather than a disaster. So the next step is you want to go ahead and scrape off as much of that flour as possible because you don't want to be cooking a ton of flour on the bottom of the pizza. And then top, we're going to give it a quick glug of olive oil and then a mixture of 2 different low moisture mozzarellas, skim and whole. For Neapolitan pizza, I like to cut up the mozzarella into cubes instead of grating it. I just find that it melts a little better. After we've added our mozzarella, we're just going to add a little bit of grated parmesan and pecorino, and then it's going straight into the oven for about 60 seconds. Now when you throw the pizza in the oven, which for a Neapolitan pizza, you really are going to have to use some kind of high temperature oven like an uni or a Gosni that can get up to 900 plus degrees. When you throw it in, the one thing you want to remember is this is going to cook fast, 60 to 90 seconds, somewhere in there. You're only going to be getting heat from one half of the pizza, so you need to compensate for that by turning. I find the safest way to do this is to really try to be watching from the side and see that that crust is leoparding before you attempt to turn it, because you want to make sure that the whole thing has gotten cooked enough that when you go in there to do the turn, you're not going to rip it. So anyway, like I said before, the number one thing is just don't be afraid. You got to get in there and move quickly and decisively, get it turned and get out, let the other half finish, and then pull it out. Like seriously, get the f out. Don't be playing around in there. It's not fun time. If you've got guests over and you mess up their pizzas, you're probably gonna get your ass beat. You're probably gonna get your ass beat. Once this pizza comes out of the oven, we're gonna spank it. Dot it with pesto and then cut and serve. And that is all it takes to make beautiful Neapolitan style pizza at home. And I definitely did not fuck up one of the 2 pizzas I was planning for today's episode and only then make 1 pizza instead. Not possible, because I was not afraid. And there's no way that I fucked up that pizza after it had been successfully baked, only because I wanted to put it back into the oven for about 10 seconds so it would start bubbling up again so it would look good on camera. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that.